want you to think back to the first time you ever remember being truly afraid. What was it? Does it stick with you today? This is the sort of thing that we talk about on the House of Asher. Won't you join us? The House of Asher, a clearinghouse for the mind. And welcome back, everybody. This is episode 36 of House of Asher. I'm your host, Steve Asher, and like I said, it's weird. It's been a weird kind of weekend for me. Me and my wife Cheyenne had kind of taken a kind of a vacation, like vocation type deal. Got to visit out into the wilds of eastern Kentucky. As you guys know, I'm on the west end of Kentucky, but a lot of our my family and our forebears kind of come in to the state through that way, and got to see a lot of pretty cool spots. If you happen to see the last episode, I did get to speak to some people about the Kentucky meat rain and all kinds of gnarly stuff like that, and just there's a bunch of crazy stuff that popped off out east, and they were very gracious and very kind to put up with my constant questions and ramblings. But anyway, like I said, this is episode 36, and what we're going to get into today is I've talked with a decent amount of folks in radio at this point, and some of the earliest folks that I remember that I spoke to some of them were the kindest, and the ones that kind of took me under their wing, cue the inspirational music. But they were very kind to me, and one of those people that I am referring to is my next guest, and I probably will butcher this name because that's what I do. Angel Espino. No, not again. Espino. Maybe.
Ironically enough, it's been butchered worse. But yeah, that wasn't even close. But it was not your fault. I don't think. I don't want to blame you on it.
That's okay, man. Like I said, I don't know how familiar you are with like horror hosts, and like from this area. Two really cool things that happened. I'd spoken with my personal, like, everyone has like their doctors from Doctor Who, like the Ninth Doctor was mine or 12th Doctor was mine. My horror host was, and you may know, like Cecil Creep from Nashville, maybe back in the day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
The guy who followed his actual name is Bob McGee, but he played the Count from Channel 5. They called him the Count of Five. And he was he was hipper, he's younger, his intro had, creature features, had Black Sabbath playing as a skull faded in from black. It was just really freaking cool. And that was always my dude. And a lot of kids that followed me are from before that. It was like, because he did like a, not a super long running thing, but long enough it affected me. And so I actually got in touch with the guy, and was hitting him up off and on for a year or so, and I'm sure he thought I was like nutty or some stalker or something for a while, and I was just like, hey, just let you know, I'm a big fan, blah blah blah. Well, he was finally gracious enough to come on the show, and the guy actually sent me like a signed poster from like back in the day, like one of the original posters, like still in the they packed them in like meat packing paper as sort of like a shtick, and he signed it and everything, so it was just like really cool. And what I was saying about the names, screwing those up, I had Dr. Gangrene, and out of Nashville, whose name is Larry Underwood, and I called him Larry Underhill. And I'm thinking, like, man, I'm watching Lord of the Rings way too much. And Mr. Underhill, which I said, that sounds really cool. Which I always thought the name like Understone, like Barry Understone. I said that would be a great name. I was probably going to be like somebody's going to steal it now, but for like a horror host, anyway. But that's my reasoning. I screw up names. I'm better with faces, but anyway. So I apologize.
I know it's better than my excuse. My excuse is that I'm Cuban, and we Latinos, we butcher as many names as we possibly can.
See, well, no, I'm just saying, I still think it would be great if you, because like I said, you're kind of a metal fan. Like if you did like a Rob Zombie cover band and call it More Cuban Than Cuban.
There you go.
I would want to see that. So anyway, and also all views and comments expressed does not reflect whatever. Because like I said, it's funny because this does go on to like YouTube, and it also does our local radio station WPKY 103 FM or 103.3 FM in Princeton. So people can be like,
"Well, it's okay. I'm actually Cuban, so I could say that."
You can get away with that.
Yeah.
Right, but well, let me ask you before we get off too deep into your radio history and all that stuff. Since we're kind of touching on the Cuban thing, Cubano. Like, when did you did you come over? Were you born here and like your heritage is Cuban, did you have like any crazy stories? Like, I have like a friend who's she's Puerto Rican, and she told me about like the Cocoy, and I'm thinking the one about the mom, the La Lorna or Lorena.
La Luna, yeah. Actually, it's funny because my entire trip over here was very generic. It was in 1980. I was part of the Mariel boat lift, which is, some of you are aware of what happened there. Jimmy Carter, who was president right before Reagan, signed into a bill that we was going to allow the borders to be open in the Mariel side, and allow Castro to send what were not his best and brightest. I came along on that trip, so I was not part of the best and brightest, but I'm here.
Come on now.
And he sent a lot of folks. My mother was lucky enough to win what was called a lottery ticket in Cuba, to be able to bring herself and a few other family members. My brother was one of them, and I was the other. Now, I was a baby at the moment, so I had no say where we stayed, where we went. We immediately were transferred over to a station. They gave us paperwork. They sent us over to California, of all places, where we stayed for a number of good years. We were there for a while. My father had just gone out of Spain. He was over there for a bit before we got to Miami. I was like 2.5 when I got here, so I wasn't born here, but I was, definitely raised in America. I'm a citizen. I've been here my whole life, basically. And funny enough, my earliest experiences with, that I can remember, because, when you're a baby, a little kid, you don't remember that stuff. But, early on when I was a little kid, there's, memories that I still have. And my earliest memories actually deal with paranormal activity, which is not that shocking when you look at the paranormal, community, and you see what a lot of folks come up with stories and, with their experiences. A lot of us start when they're young. My earliest is probably when I was like 4 or 5, when we started having some kind of paranormal stuff. And it was because of the house that we moved in when we moved to Miami, Florida. The very first house that we lived in here, Steve, I kid you not, it used to be a funeral home. And nice. I'm pretty sure that I've told you the story, a while back, and you might have forgotten or whatever, but it was a converted funeral home that was a block away from a church. And I'm not even kidding. And what they would do is, in the 1950s and 60s, they would prepare the bodies at the funeral home, coming directly from the morgue or the hospital, if they were there at the hospital. And they would take them to the funeral home to have the funeral. But in the transition, there were the bodies that would be taken over to the church, which was the block down the road. And then from the church, they'll make their way from there for a few hours of viewing for the family, and then from there they will make their way over to the actual final resting spot for the body, which would be the cemetery, which was in the area about maybe 2 miles down, further down the road. And the house that we lived in was the actual funeral area where they would prepare the bodies to go to the church.
So you're talking about this is where they actually did the work on them, like handling them, for prepping them for the viewing.
Right. Which again was a block down the road. Why they had it separate? I mean, we don't know why. Yeah, maybe it's just for logistic reasons, because it was this is back in the 50s and 60s, so we're not too sure why they handled it like that, but that's the way it was done for about 4 decades. Now, mind you, here we come, 1980, happy-go-lucky. The place we moved into was rented out as a home, as a family home for at least 20 years at that point. Or 15, something along those lines. But funny enough, Steve, when we get in there, the moment, the day we're moving in, there's a family moving out. And my father asked, he tried to bring up a conversation, where you guys leaving? It's a great house, and, what are you guys moving forward? Just to see, the neighborhood and ask, a few questions or whatnot. And the only thing they said was, you'll find out soon why. And you'll move out quick too, don't worry.
Oh, that's cryptic.
Yeah. And my dad was like, okay, sure. Now, this was a duplex home. I just want to bring that up. So it wasn't like we're like moving in and the previous tenants are moving out. This was like the right next door neighbor that lives in a duplex home, because they had split the house down the middle. It's a big property. So what they did was they split the house in two, and they rented both sides. And we were renting one side as the neighbor right next door, literally, was moving out. But it was really part of the same house.
Right. Okay.
So as we're moving in, they're moving out. My father gets that from the gentleman, and he thinks nothing of it. He thinks it's just some silly, argument that this guy had with the owner or something. So we move in. No joke, the first month, nothing happens. It was very, very, easy to move in, and everything was quiet. We didn't hear any footsteps or anything of that nature.
Well,
but
at
I
that
remember.
Time, well, I was just saying, at that time, just like anything else, you're in that process. You're not sitting there, like you said, very still. Or if you guys were sitting down, it was probably like, man, we've been moving for 12 hours to hit the shower, hit the bed, to try it again tomorrow. So I mean, it's like you didn't have the open. I don't want to say the open mind, but just you didn't have the flow of just being able to open your mind and hear and this, and really take in what's going on around you. You were just trying to fill the house with your stuff.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, it's not like we had time to sit there and also see us moving across the table or anything of that nature, So, we were just putting boxes away and trying to organize our lives, But sure enough, I mean, it wasn't too long after that certain things started to happen. And my earliest memory was seeing a shadow of what looked like a little kid walking from one wall to the other wall. And I kept seeing that it kept happening over and over again. And there was something sinister about it. It wasn't like this shadow was trying to scare me or grab me or anything of that nature. I just kept seeing what looked like a shadow of a little kid walking towards the wall.
Well, can I ask you something real quick? Now,
sure.
I used to. That's really strange. Was one of my first experiences, and maybe it's just that's kind of what, like when you're a kid, that's what your mind can kind of maybe grasp. Maybe that's how something manifests to kids, because just by nature, kids are scared of shadows, So I wonder if, maybe that ties in with just the makeup. I'm just like, you always hear people say, well, hey, why is it that there's always, ghosts are always white and like Victorian,
right.
Like 200 years is going to be like, guys with like man buns making duck faces. But the shadow that you saw, and I'll let you get back to your comment.
Sure.
When you saw it, now, because I know when I saw what I saw as a kid, how like if you say shine a light across the wall, or like if light shines through a window pane and then the outline of the window pane goes across the wall, it sort of bends and dapples with the shape, whatever it's landing on. Was it something like that, or was it like a standalone off from the wall?
Well, normally when I was here, it would be either at mid-afternoon or late night, so it would be very, dark out at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like it was a shadow just cast on the wall, walking, via the wall. Literally, it looked like it was in midair walking from one end of the room to the other, but it looked like a dark figure, like a little shadowy figure. So it was very much 3D to me, where I could see it in physical air, walking in midair. Type of shadow.
Well, let me ask you this again, and I'm sorry I'm walking what you're saying. midair, so it's doing that creepy float thing.
Right.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah. And I saw it. One of the reasons why I wasn't scared to do this, a year previous to this, I had an incident in California where I was outside with a friend and we saw what we thought was a possible UFO in the sky. And ever since then, mind you, I'm a little kid, but for whatever reason, those kind of things didn't scare me. And I saw an object in the sky. It was floating there for about 5 minutes. I turned over to my friend. We were little kids playing outside in the yard. You know, we were just playing what I believe was the toys from the show Mask. If I remember right, I don't remember that cartoon, but I had the little toys for that cartoon.
Okay, yeah. You're talking about okay. See, I thought you were talking about the kid with the red hair mask. I didn't remember them making. That would be a hard show to make movies. That would be. And I'm not making any jokes. I'm simply saying, wow, that's a hard.
No.
Those would be hard to find. Probably worth money. But I remember Mask. Yeah. That was super cool. Yeah, I
used to be big into the show Mask and Jason the Will Warriors. I used to collect those toys as a kid. And mind you, that's what we were playing with. We were just outside, but a couple kids playing, and we both saw it. And it was a weird object. And ever since then, I have had no fear of whether it be aliens or ghosts or anything of that nature. So when I would see this in the house, it didn't really scare me. Somebody else might have jumped and ran away. I just would stay there and I would stare at it and would just walk away every time. So I was never really attacked physically, or anything like that of that nature, or intimidated by these things, or there was never a level of let's try to freak the boy out type of thing. That never happened to me. Well, my brother had a different story, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that was my next question. I was going to say, first of all, did any of your family was kind of interacting with this? Did it act differently? But it seems almost like, I mean, not that it kind of came kind of blasé, and just well, there's the ghost again, like you're past each other in the morning. Hey Sam, hey Tom, and you're drinking your coffee and you're walking opposite ways. But it was like you said, it was more like, okay, there's that weird thing again. Okay,
right.
Well, it's just doing what it does, standing over there staring at me. I'm going to walk on and keep going with the day, because it sounds like, I mean, it happened more frequently enough. It, like you said, it lost a little bit of that, which is, it's going to sound funny to people who haven't had experiences like that, but it becomes part of the part of the day, part of the location, because it's just like, all right, I live next to it, not far from the train track. I have people come visit, and it's like, anybody that lives especially in my area in Princeton, can hear the train all through town, and it's just like, man, isn't that loud? I was like, honestly, I forgot it's there. It becomes so ingrained that I guess you become desensitized to it. But you were saying that your brother had sort of a different experience with it. Yeah,
because with me, it never got physical to the form that I felt that hurt me in any way or slapped me around or do anything, physical nature. But my brother would often wake up and he would be in sweats, just sweating and screaming. And it wasn't that he was having nightmares, that he was physically being hit by something.
Wow.
And he'll wake up screaming from actually getting slapped or getting punched. And I do remember one time I kept hearing him yell. Mind you, we slept in separate bedrooms because it was a pretty big place we moved into. And my bedroom was right next door to his room. And I remember one day he was yelling and I ran into his room. And as soon as I turned on the lights, the bed, it was weird because the sheets in the bed lifted off the ground from about a foot off of his body and just floated back down. But I could tell as when I was walking in, it was dark. It looked like he was pinned down by somebody.
So you're saying basically there was some presence that obviously was between him and the sheet enough to have the bed suspended a foot or so off the bed. So, did it have
the sheet itself lifted as soon as I turned on the light. It lifted off the bed and then it came back down.
Oh, okay.
My brother wasn't floating, but the sheet was. Okay. And then my brother just jumped out of the bed and ran out of the room. And I was like, what happened? What was going on? And as I'm walking out, my brother's like, I'm not going back in that room. I'm not going back in the house. And he was trying to leave. And it's funny because, no bueno, exactly. Yeah. Now, mind you, my brother knew a little bit of English, and I spoke, already at this point the language. My parents still had no idea, one syllable. But me and my brother would communicate mostly in English at this point. And he ran out, and he said, "I'm not coming back to the house. This place is, freaking me out, and this and that." And he spent a couple of nights out of the house because of this one incident. I went back into the house. I didn't feel anything, out of the ordinary or see anything or anything of that nature that night. But I understood, where he was coming from because of what I had seen before. So I knew he wasn't going crazy. And I knew something was happening to him. I saw the actual levitation of the sheets before he jumped out of the bed. And I saw his face, like there was a very natural look to him speaking about this. And it's ironic because a couple years ago, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but we lost our mother. Yeah. She passed away from cancer a couple years ago. And a couple of months before she died, she was still physically healthy enough where we had her here at the house. And she was very communicative about, different things. And we were talking about the past. And we were talking about, how we got to the U.S. and stuff. And one day we're having a family get-together in Spanish. That's what she spoke. We were all talking, and I bring up, remember that house we lived in, the one that was haunted? And my brother opened up, and he's like, "Oh my God, yes!" And he started talking about it. And I have an actual recording of my family speaking about that incident. This is a couple years ago, and we telling some of their stories and some of their memories. And this is something, it's unscripted. I have it on video, which anybody who understands the language would know. Just by looking at the video, this is very legit. Because we're talking about random stuff, and then that's just kind of brought up. It's not like it was part of the conversation, By the way, if you hear barking in the background, it's my dog going crazy. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I was just going to interject and say, a comment and then also a question. First of all, comment-wise, you can generally tell when someone's pulling your leg and playing with you or adding to a story. You can, a lot of times, just like now, I'm sitting there kind of thinking, as I'm going, but it's a thing of the way a person might pause, or that you might kind of just see, their body posture change or stiffen a little bit because it's real uncomfortable. If you're recounting something that was extremely terrifying, you're not going to be just having a good time, cracking your knuckles and having a laugh. You're reliving that. It's just like say somebody does like a regression therapy, hypnotherapy or whatever, they're still going to display the same sort of fearful postures in that, and especially like you said, the fact you've got video that really substantiates it. I was going to ask you though, now before coming to America, was this something common in your family? Because like I said, I know in my family, I don't want to say that they saw ghosts around every corner, but we did have those, do you remember Aunt so-and-so and Mom was listening to, there was a story, my mom was listening to a phonograph or so. I wasn't like, gosh, she ain't that old, but it was probably in the 50s or something, and she was listening to like, some LPs, and the music, I think, stopped, and you heard someone say her name, which her name was Myrtle, and she looked down the hallway, thought maybe somebody had come, it was, whatever was coming in, for whatever reason, and she didn't see anybody. Then she smelled, I think it was like roses or lilac or whatever perfume of the great aunt would tend to wear, and thought, oh, well, someone's coming to visit. And then later that night, they got a call, how it's going to end. About around the same time that happened, they said, yes, she had passed away in her sleep, or passed away, and she had asked about you or something earlier in that night, almost like she knew something was happening. So, but did anything like that happen, or was it a lot more mundane than that? Because I know that, and again, this is making a kind of a blanket assumption. I know different regions, different places. I think everyone has paranormal experiences, if they talk about it or don't. But especially like certain cultures are a lot closer to to the situation of like, it's a very Western kind of thing of going, well, you're no longer, you're a body now, so now you're scary. And I can understand the health risks and stuff of dealing with the corpse and all that, but it's still, that if it is a spirit, that's still someone that you loved or whatever. Was that something that was more common in your upbringing, or did that was just a strange happenstance?
Not really. That was really. I mean, once we left that house, I had no other, ghostly or paranormal activity like that. It was several years later where I had a second UFO kind of thing happen.
Mm-hmm.
I was like maybe 13 or 14 at that point. So it had been, a few years. But no, it's ironic. In my family, there really isn't much of a history of that. Now, there is a history of mental illness. I'm part of my family, but nothing to that extreme. And the worst is one of my uncles committed suicide because he had gotten a divorce. He got depressed. Long story, but it was determined that he was mentally ill. But this was 20 years prior. So, other than that, there really wasn't much of a history of mental illness or paranormal activity of any kind from either side of my dad or my mother's side of the family. Now, my brother has a different father. We have the same mother, but different dads. I'm not too sure about his dad's side of the family, but I do know that they deal more with his traditional Cuban Santeria, voodoo, that kind of stuff, which deal with a little bit more of the fringe, saints and rituals and whatnot that happen in Cuba, just because of the religious upbringing. But my brother himself, I believe, is Catholic, so it's not like he believes in that kind of stuff himself. But his family does have kind of a tie-in on his dad's side.
I was going to ask you real quick, too. I was actually watching a show. My goodness. I'm trying to think of the name of it. It had to do with... they had went where Pablo Escobar, is that the correct name?
Escobar, yeah.
I actually got one right. Great. And they were talking about their... well, back in the area where he was from, he was like a big drug lord and stuff. And there was there was like a religious thing that it wasn't quite that, but it's where they worshipped death, or not worshipped death, let me rephrase that. They had like the death icon as sort of like their symbol, but they were like, look, we don't fear death, so that is sort of like almost like a patron saint. I'm blanking on what it's called, but it had to do with basically you embrace death, you recognize death,
right.
It's no longer scary, go live your life, don't go looking for death, but don't fear it. And
right.
And that's struck me as, like I said, that's so 180 degrees from where most people's at. It seems like people that are either very close to death and that have hopefully come to grips with whatever, and I'm not to get real dark, but have come to grips with whatever and made whatever necessary, what's the term? Just arrangements, I guess you can get that.
Agreement with themselves, arrangement, yeah. I know where you're getting at. Maybe that could be the case. And one of the things now that we touch on this that makes sense is if maybe his family has some kind of tie-in that followed him along. Because my brother's always been very strong when it comes to these kind of matters. Like, he's not afraid of these things now, but back when he was a kid, obviously it freaked him out. But as he's gotten older, he's very fearless when it comes to a lot of things. He's also faced, a lot of different, trials and tribulations in his own life that are completely off the grid when it comes to paranormal, just, everyday struggles. So, he's had a very hectic life. And the fact that he's here and he's still alive and well speaks a lot about who he's become as an adult. And I'm very proud of him, to be honest with you. He's completely changed who he was for a while into who he is today, and he's come a very long way as a human being. But maybe that was part of the reason he had to go through these issues. And it makes sense. Maybe they were trying to tell him something as he was getting older, like, hey, don't go crazy and do something stupid like your uncle. Maybe it was one of those things, or God knows what it could have been.
Right. Well, and it's a thing where I don't know. I'm not necessarily saying there's a synchronicity and everything, but maybe sometimes the lumps and the hardships that we face is much as we can't. We hate them and we hate seeing people go through it. I know in my own life, just one of those deals. It's like sometimes people have to get knocked in the head a time or two to kind of go, oh, okay, well, yeah, I can't go this way, or I'll have to change, or I'll have to grow, or I'll have to, and because all that's hard, and I wonder if, and it may be completely not connected and stuff, but do you think that people who have had situations, be it with spirits or alien stuff, and I'll ask you something else about that in a second, but do you think that somehow is maybe preparing you for something else? And moreover than that, it does seem like a lot of times there is a correlation between, which to me, aliens, ghosts, all that kind of stuff is all kind of paranormal, and it all falls under that same flag. But it seems like a lot of times if people who have had abduction situations report that they have more paranormal things happen, or seem to maybe notice it. I don't know, maybe because they're on sort of a different wavelength by that time, vibrational plane, if you want to go to that degree. But I don't know. It's just something I've always wondered about.
It's possible. I'll tell you this much. I've had a little bit of both experiences, both dealing in ghostly paranormal. Well, what one would assume would be kind of a ghostly paranormal activity, and like I said, I've had several UFO related activities in my life. And when I normally, as I do a lot of these podcasts myself, when I hear guests tell me, well, I've had this experience, that experience, and that experience, I'm like, well, there's so many experiences for this to be legit. But then I look back at my own life and I'm like, well, I've had 2 different experiences myself, so I really can't judge the person. But in my own life, it's kind of ironic because it started off very paranormal-like. But as my life has progressed, I'm 40 years old now, my interests are mostly in the ufology community than ghostly realm. And it's something that's kind of taken over more of my interest as the years have gone by. And what really captured my interest 100% was the Travis Walton story early on, the famous Fire in the Sky story.
Sure.
That's what really captured my attention. And I remember reading the book that came out, going to see the movie with my father back 20 plus years ago,
right.
And seeing it in theaters.
Right. Well, I mean, it was a phenomenon. I mean, that was a thing where obviously you had stuff like like Close Encounters and stuff like that, and but coming from like you said, like a real life story is huge, and it kind of opened it up, because before it'd be like going, oh, sure, he sees aliens, call the buggy bin. And I mean, I have friends from around this area. I cannot remember if you've ever interviewed Geraldine Stith. It was connected with the Kelly UFO story around Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Because if you haven't, you need to talk to her.
Sure. I haven't talked to her, but I've heard of the story, sure.
Okay. And, that was one of those situations, too, because, like you were talking about Travis Walton, when all that popped, it was, first of all, no one's going to believe you, because no one wants to believe you.
Right.
And then, and they're going to find any way to discredit you, and they're going to find any way to try to almost, literally intimidate you to go, well, come on, just quit playing around. It gets to the point where it starts scaring them, like, man, this could be true. I had been researching a story, the Stanford UFO incident, which had happened out in eastern Kentucky. It was one of the things I was checking out while I was there. Kind of a very similar type deal, driving, the cars goes crazy. I know they can't control it, start losing time, all this different stuff that goes on. And which the women, there were 3 women, 2 of them, X amount of years later, all died of cancer, very quick acting cancer, almost like they'd been exposed to high levels of radioactivity. And it's one of those things. It seems like there's very few people that walk away from something like that unscathed, much less their reputations, much less their family stuff. You hear so many people, obviously like Travis and all those guys, a lot of times marriages don't last. You're dealing with basically like UFO PTSD, and a lot of times they don't even know why they're having all these issues, until maybe they go under some sort of regression. So, But so I mean, so what you're saying is you went and saw like the Fire in the Sky movie, and you read the book and all that stuff, and that's what lit the fire under you, right?
Yeah, this is a few scenes in the movie that when I saw them in theaters, it completely overtook my mind, and I was like, it almost felt like I connected to that scene, like maybe that did something that I went through, and it was a complete game changer for me. So I'm not saying that I know I've been abducted or that I've had regression memory therapy or anything like that, which I haven't had the therapy because I'm afraid of what I might find out, to be honest with you. But there were certain scenes which really hit home for me, and I got more and more interested in ufology because of that. So, I mean, I don't know if maybe we could connect that to me seeing, no ghosts over the last 20, 30 years, but definitely the activity when it comes to UFOs has increased. And I agree, I think all that stuff is connected. In fact, I think a lot of activity over the years has been either alien activity that's been misinterpreted somehow. Mm-hmm. And I think, for example, the leprechaun lore, the chupacabra, these different mythologies that we've built over the last 20, 30, 100 years, 200 years, wherever the leprechaun mythology is. I believe these are, mythologies that are created by misidentifying, aliens or UFOs that might have landed, might have done some shenanigans to tell folks, and people have misunderstood what they're looking at. And I'm not saying the shadow I saw might have been an alien, but then again, I'm not saying it wasn't.
Right. Well, look at something like, and I'm sorry for walking what you're saying, but and
right.
I don't get really deep into religion on the show, but I mean, I know this guy's name. Like, was taken up in a fiery chariot, and flames, and it sounded like the guy was picked up in a rocket and took off. It was supposedly the only guy in the body that didn't die, and I'm like, that sounds a lot like, wheels within wheels and this and that, and I was like, this is like machinery.
Ezekiel's wheel. I mean, you're speaking about Ezekiel's wheel.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you real quick, because like I said, we've probably got maybe 5 to 6 minutes left. You do the PSN stuff, and I know that you're looking at doing a new show coming up. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, I've done radio for the last 11 years. I was recently, up to recently, the host of Skywatchers Radio, which is still continuing. And Skywatchers Radio has a new host now, and I had to leave that show for a little bit because I'm dealing with a little bit of a thyroid issue, which is why my voice goes out a little bit once in a while. But I'm coming back in January, and I'm going to bring back my original show, which was Inside the Jackal's Head, which is the show that I ran for a good number of years, almost 9 years, before I completely shut it down. Mm-hmm. And that's exciting because we're going to do it both on audio and video, and we're planning to really, concentrate on that as my main, focus for radio and on video for YouTube. And on that show, I'm going to be able to cover everything from paranormal, ufology, everything that kind of goes inside my head that I think about. So it won't just be one topic. Obviously, ufology is, something that I've carried both on radio and within my everyday structure because it's something that's near and dear to me. So that's going to get heavily covered on the show. But it's exciting because I'm putting it together for a January re-release date, I should say, re-release or rebirth of the show Inside the Jackal's Head. So that's going to be on PSN Radio, which is www.psn-radio.com. You can listen live there on the show right now tentatively will be on Wednesday nights, on audio. But right now, if you want to listen to Skywatchers, for example, that's on Tuesday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern. And I produce still the show. I'm still producing it, even though I'm not the live on-air host anymore. I have, still retain the producer's chair. And Alan Weiler, who used to be the co-host, is now the main host on Skywatchers, and he's fantastic. He's going to take over the show and continue forward. And getting back to my story real quick, and speaking touching on very lightly on the Ezekiel's wheel and religious stuff, just briefly, something that struck me. When you go back to religious doctrine, we do have in the Bible a lot of incidents where it looks paranormal in nature, it looks religious in nature, but if you flip the script and you look at it from a certain way, it can be very ufology in nature. For example, Moses spoke to a burning bush, right?
Right.
Well, the burning bush was always taken it as being who?
They said it was God.
Right. What if these are aliens pretending to be God to try to, manage the situation, or, put their own will into humanity at that point and kind of manifest themselves in a way that we could kind of understand them.
Right. I mean, like you said, just like you're talking to, not to belittle people at the time, but I mean, I'm sure the people in the future look at us and go, wow, they were like children. I mean, you're going to try to hand it to them in a way that they can comprehend it. Let me ask you something, because like I said, I do touch on, movies and stuff like that. In the few minutes that we got left, what would you say are your top 3 alien-related movies? And it doesn't necessarily have to be scary movies. It can just be like something tying in with that.
Well, number 3, Aliens 2.
Oh, yeah, it's a solid pick.
Yeah, that's one of the greatest films ever made. That's number 3. Number 2, I would say Travis says Fire in the Sky. And number 1, just because I'm a huge Star Wars nerd, 1977 Star Wars. That's number 1 on my list.
Okay. If I had to pick them, man, it's so messed up, because that's the thing. I do horror stuff, but I come into the scene on like Star Trek and stuff like that, which I'm not in either camp. I like Star Wars too, because it was one of the first movies I saw in the theater. But just because it's quirky, The Last Starfighter. I know you probably don't even remember that movie.
Oh, of course, I love that movie.
I forever was hoping to find that video game because I want to go to space. I want to be on the new. I do want to be on the new Space Force, and that's as political as I'm getting. I'm going to be on that Space Force, man. But
I'm with you, brother. Let me tell you, if they let me sign up, and my health is allowing me to do it, I'm there with you 100%.
All right, and also, Enemy Mine. I think it had a really good message.
Yep, Enemy Mine was great.
I dug it.
Yep.
Any movie that says, Mickey Mouse is a big idiot, and I think it's great. Number 1, man, that's hard. I'm gonna, I pick it kind of strange. Obviously I could go to like Plan 9 and stuff, which is not so much about, honest to God, aliens, but okay. I'm trying to think. It was a Star Trek movie, and
okay,
they had come back and they were in New York City and had the punk rock scene when the guy's like, I don't like you, and I say blank you, and this, and Spock gives him the knocks him out. Which is that?
The void. That was the Voyage Home.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, that's solid.
Yep.
I like that. I dug Spock. Spock was sort of like my spirit animal when I was a kid. Because I was just like, if I maintain, because me, I'm really amped up and kind of whacked out. So I'm like,
you're more Captain Kirk today than you were Spock.
I don't know, man. Is that a fat joke? I don't know.
No.
I could use the two.
No, as you're more alpha. Remember, Spock was more laid back. He would take control if he had to. But, the captain was always the one on top of the ship. Captain Kirk was running the game. Right. And he got all the ladies.
Okay.
No matter what color they were. So you're the man.
No, you the man. But what I'm going to do here is I'm fading it out, because we could do this for another 2 hours. But we'll have you back on. But I want to tell everybody, enjoy the rest of their day at any time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Check on your bed. Check on outside. Never know. Captain Spock may be out there. Might be looking for your eclairs in the trash can. But care for each other. Care for yourselves. And above all, until next time, stay scared, everybody. Have a great night.